The Creative Psychotherapist is the official podcast of the Creative Clinicians Corner, a practice-building resource for creative psychotherapists. TCP Podcast is the cast for creative, expressive, and experiential-focused psychotherapists curious to learn how to design, build, and scale a thriving private practice. Your host, Raina Lombardi, interviews successful therapists about the tools and strategies they have used to develop creative-focused practices. They also talk about the products, services, and side hustles they have developed using their knowledge and creativity to enhance their therapy practices, make a greater impact in their communities, and diversify their income streams. Welcome. Now here's your host, Raina Lombardi.
I'd like to welcome Deanna Barton to our show today. She is a registered and board-certified art therapist, a certified art educator, and an artist. In 2016, she founded Artspiration, LLC, to provide art experiences geared at helping individuals tap into their most authentic selves. She received a Master's of Arts degree in art therapy from the George Washington University and completed her undergraduate studies at Spelman College. She's been a board member of the Florida Art Therapy Association since 2013 and has presented on the topics of self-care and emotional wellness through art making at various symposiums. Over the past 10 years, Deanna's worked in various settings, including schools, psychiatric facilities, and community-based organizations. She specializes in working with young women of color who are dealing with anxiety, depression, family and intergenerational trauma, and self-determination concerns. She believes all human beings are intrinsically creative and need to express this creativity in order to live a balanced and fulfilling life. Her diverse work and personal life experiences have taught her the benefits of creativity as an integral part of our lives and our world. She's witnessed time and time again how art truly heals us. Welcome, Deanna. Thank you for being willing to talk to me today.
Thanks for having me, Raina.
So why don't we start off by talking about the process that you went through in going from working in community agencies and in the school system to moving towards full-time practice, your own practice.
Yeah, so fresh out of grad school, you need a job. So you kind of go the predictable route. And of course, you need your postgraduate, contact hours and all of that. So it just made a lot of sense for me to kind of go into the community where the jobs were. Mm-hmm. I was really looking forward to moving to Miami to work within the school system here because it's one of the very few places that actually has a integrated art therapy department within a school system. So I pursued it, got that job, and worked in the position for some time, was also put into the classroom to teach for a couple of years. But always in the back of my mind, I had the vision, the big vision of what my role as an art therapist would be in the world. Mm-hmm. And so I just always had the itch to do more. Mm-hmm. I always kind of viewed myself as an agent of change in the mental health field as far as making it more accessible to those who might not feel it's for them. Sure. And because we use art as our main modality and, source of healing, it seemed to be very approachable for a lot of people. But working in the school system, you're typically working just with children or just with children who have special needs. So you can't really expand beyond that within that institution. Mm-hmm. So the private practice really was calling me and gave me that opportunity to reach more people and also kind of move into working with more of the adult population, mm-hmm. which is something I was always really passionate about.
Nice. So when you first started, did you stay with the full-time job as you opened Artspiration?
I sure did. Yeah, I was definitely nervous of quitting cold turkey and just jumping into it. So I took it on as more of a side hustle, trying to just slowly integrate it into the day-to-day, get the feel for what private practice is like, while still having the steady income of a full-time position.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way to do it. If if you're not sure and, it's just you and you have to take care of everything. You're responsible for everything. To just quit everything cold turkey and go like, okay, I'm just going to support myself through this that I don't even know what I'm doing yet.
Yeah,
Pretty intimidating.
definitely.
And so, do you have a physical location for your practice? How does that work? Do you have like your own building and your own office space? Are you renting space from another practice that you use partially? How does your practice work?
Yeah, so I actually rent a small office space within a larger practice. Since I kind of made the choice to start building my business very slowly, I
Mm-hmm.
felt it was smarter for me to just rent hourly
Yeah.
at a place that would allow me to do so. So currently, I have a small office that I rent hourly, a couple of days a week at a larger practice. And I also have my home office where I'm able to do online virtual therapy with those individuals in Florida who are not located near my physical location.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also been a nice thing to have.
Awesome. So, um, obviously, telehealth is a growing area of practicing. And for some people, it's intimidating because they're not really sure how that works and if it can really be effective. Can you talk about your experience in using telehealth as a modality to help people? Because I think it's important for us to really kind of dispel some of the myths around it.
Definitely. So I actually use a platform called DoxyMe.
Hmm.
They have a free component and then one you can also pay for. But what I love, it's a very simple platform that doesn't require people to have to download any special software, or literally all they have to do is click a link and they are
Hmm.
there. So it's really user friendly. Um, as far as, some of the intimidation factors, I think for the clients, one thing that I offer is doing a video consultation through DoxyMe. So before they even decide if they want to do therapy with me, I give them that opportunity to experience what the telehealth
Hmm.
session would be like. They see me, I see them, we talk and answer whatever questions they have. So that also gives people an opportunity to see if that's something they're comfortable with. I've
Sure.
had a few consultations where like, yeah, I think I'd rather do this in office, which is totally cool. But also, I think it's alleviated some of anxiety for those that are interested in telehealth but weren't really sure how the art making would work through a virtual platform. So
Yeah.
that I think has been the component that I'm still kind of figuring out.
Hmm.
But what I typically do is the format's very similar to an in-office session, but when they're creating the art, I help have them tilt their screen or their phone if they're using it down towards their paper in their hands, so that I can
Hmm.
actually watch what they're creating in real time. And then they will
Mm.
either hold the image up in front of the screen or kind of to the side of themselves so I can see them and the art as we process it. And
Okay.
then some of them are comfortable with either photographing and emailing me their artwork, or I try to take a little screenshot of it during the actual live call.
Hmm.
So there are some things that work well and some things, just kind of figure it out as you go. But I definitely think I've really been interested to see how many clients are wanting the virtual sessions
Hmm.
just for the sake that it's easier for them. They don't have to commute somewhere. I also offer a lower rate of pay if you do online because my overhead costs are lower. So I'm able to offer the sessions a little bit
Mm.
lower as well. So
That's
that
a
works.
great idea.
So it works really well for, certain individuals.
Very cool. So when you do the consultation,
Mm-hmm.
how do you talk about what materials the client should have?
Mm.
Since like if they're coming into your office, you get to choose what's there and what's available. And so how do you broach that? Because as all of us know, art materials are expensive.
Yeah.
And if you're working with somebody who already is, really kind of struggling to just pay for the sessions, how do you broach that with them to make sure that they have the tools that they need to engage in the art making part of the process?
So what I do is I provide them with a recommended art material list that kind of outlines the ideal art materials they should have accessible to them if they're working with me through telehealth. And it also includes a link that they can click and go to an Amazon shopping list that I've already compiled to make the shopping super simple.
Amazing.
So the shopping list is like between $100, $150. And of course, I let them know, like, feel free to get other things that aren't on the list if price points aren't right. But if that's still not something that they're able to do, I literally let them know to have whatever they have access to with them, whether it's pencils, regular computer paper, found objects, recycled materials, old fabric. We'll make a way to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
Working in the school system and some of the community organizations in the past, I had to get really thrifty with materials.
Yes.
So I try to bring that into these sessions as well, and letting them know that we can make art with literally anything. It's up to you to decide what you're gravitating to, what interests you. And then, of course, having some paper and your traditional crayons, colored pencils are always helpful, because that's something that's pretty approachable and accessible for most people and affordable.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we start. And then as we go through, once they become a client and we've worked for a couple of sessions, if there are certain materials that I feel are going to help them move through their process, I encourage them to seek them out. And oftentimes they're open to that and able to find something that fits within their financial, situation.
Wonderful. That's great to know that that doesn't become a barrier to the work and that you're still able to engage in that way.
Yeah.
I have like a couple of supervisees that I work with using telehealth, but I've only recently started the process of offering services to clients that way. And it's only been with established patients or established clients that I've done so. And so I've been able to give them some materials with them, and knowing like, okay, well, next time we meet, it'll be online and they won't be in the office.
Right.
Just due to some transportation challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked out really well. It wasn't like a permanent every time we meet, but
Right.
it really allowed to maintain the continuity. But it really sparked this idea of like, okay, I think this is really a viable to offer for clients on a more regular basis. So
Definitely.
it's great to hear how you've structured it and have the Amazon list.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
I try to make it as easy as possible,
Yeah.
I think that's really important. They're already kind of faced with, the dilemma of seeking therapy and having the courage to go through with it. So if I can make the beginning of their process seamless and easy, that's always, I think very important.
Absolutely. Anything we can do to break down the barriers to get them in, I think is an important part of the work that we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you wanting a vacation in paradise? A vacation to rekindle the passion? A vacation without the kids? A vacation where you can learn how to communicate, where you and your partner hear each other and gain insight? Vacation Counseling is your next vacation. Stay in one of our exclusive villas for the ultimate couples retreat. Enjoy dining, boating, and all that South Florida has to offer. Let our counselors guide you through the rest. Vacation Counseling, accepting applications for summer 2020. Visit www.vacationcounseling.com for more information.
So how do clients find you? How are you approaching the marketing and advertisement part of developing your practice? You're in an area where in Florida in general, we're very, very spread out, but there's a higher saturation of art therapists in the community that you're in compared to other places. My office is the only private practice I know of that has art therapists in my community. But I know on your side, there's a lot more. So how do you go about the marketing piece in an area where there are other people doing the same type of work, and how do you help yourself stand out?
Yeah, so I think one thing that has been helpful is renting an office in a larger practice, because there's that option of having people referred to you if they feel as though the art therapy may be a great addition to their primary therapy, or if they think art therapy is a good fit for other reasons. You know, maybe they just haven't been making the progress they'd like to have made with traditional talk therapy. Another thing that I think helps me stand out is that I work more with adults than children. So that's also something that's a bit different. But as far as marketing, my main sources have been Psychology Today, where you set up your own profile. I get, fairly consistent phone calls or emails through that. And then I'm also listed on Open Path Collective, which is a free service to clinicians who are willing to offer lower rate sessions. So I've got a lot of people who have sought me out through Open Path. And then I'm also a part of another directory called Therapy for Black Girls. So it's very specific to young Black women or Black women. And I've got a lot of clients who have come through there as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So really like honing into your niche.
Definitely.
And so I know the online listings can be helpful. And also sometimes it's hit or miss depending upon, sometimes you might get lots of calls and then nothing, crickets for a while. Are there any other methods that you've been utilizing to build your business?
I definitely try to keep a presence on social media, mainly through Instagram. And then I also have my website as well. So I'm always able to direct people to that. I have a blog on my website that allows, just people to get resources or information or to stay in contact with me, see what's going on. So I think those have been helpful. I can't say that I've gotten a lot of traffic from Instagram, but I do think it's a nice thing to have, that presence, just because often when they hear about a business or a person, that's the first place people go to find out, like, what are they up to? What do their offices look like, So that's been helpful, I think, in that standpoint.
Yeah, I think social media, really, there's no phone books anymore. I mean, if they are, people throw them out, like you go to the mailbox and you're like, what is that on top of the mailbox? It's just the phone books. People don't want them. But because everybody's looking online and using the online directories to find what they need, and then the social media gives a more in-depth view as to whether or not it's the right fit. So it is an important part, I think, of owning a practice and getting people to take notice. What are the kinds of things that you like to share and post about in your social media?
Most of my posts are about how to go about utilizing art as a source of healing. And I try to post things that are quick and easy and don't require artistic skill. So a lot of it is based in self-reflection and mindfulness and different types of exercises, or even just food for thought that might spark your idea or your creativity and drive you to want to draw or create. Sometimes I'm talking about different topics that I think are important, that I've also noticed are coming into my office very often, whether it be relationships or this idea of self-care, and how nowadays self-care is kind of a mixed bag of things. Some people think manicures and pedicures are self-care, whereas you have those who are like, I don't know if that's self-care. So exploring what self-care is and how do we define it, and are there different components of it, things like that. Just to really kind of hold conversations and educate individuals about aspects of wellness that I think are beneficial.
So more content driven.
Definitely content. Yeah.
Right. You're giving them some food for what it might be like to work with you, and the types of conversations that you might have with them, and how you might guide them with the art making process. At least that's what I'm hearing.
Definitely. You said it perfectly.
I think part of the whole marketing, at least the way I like to think about it, is breaking it down into 3 parts. Is one, how do I get people to know about me and the work that I'm doing and know about my practice? How do I get people to not necessarily, I guess it would be like know, like, trust. So how do I get them to like me, or like give them the option of whether or not to like me? And I think the social media piece fills that. And
Definitely.
and how do you develop a sense of trust that they're like, okay, I think this really is the right place, the right person, and get them to make that call.
For sure.
Because therapy's it's not like you wake up one day and you go, you know what, I think I'm gonna go to therapy today. Just gonna find a therapist. Like most people, they like spend a lot of time mulling this over.
Yeah.
They've been thinking about it for months. They've been researching for months. They may have gone to your website multiple times before they actually make that decision.
Yeah, definitely. It's a big decision, and like we were talking a little bit about art materials, if you're doing it virtually, you want to try to present yourself in a way that is as transparent as possible, so they understand who they're potentially going to be sitting with and having those very difficult conversations with.
Yeah.
And also with the art making, I mean, adults are often very anxious when it comes to art making because it's nothing they do, or they don't draw and color and play make-believe anymore. So it's like tapping into some other stuff for them. So, just giving them a little bit of like, hey, you can be creative when you're cooking. You can be creative with the way you dress. Like, just as an introduction to like, hey, yeah, maybe I am a creative being and art is something that I could potentially use, is also how I go about it, to just help them understand that, yes, you can make art even if you're not artistic or working in an arts-based profession. This is also accessible to you.
Before I knew what art therapy was, I was in undergrad school at USF, and I was an art major there, and everybody had to take this like really big, it was like a really large oversized class, like in the auditorium, like 350 people. And it was kind of like a survey of, it wasn't humanities. I'd already taken humanities, but it was like a survey of our art history. And the professor there, his name was Ed Ross. He was a ceramicist, and he taught that class. And one of the things that I have always taken away from that class is a statement that he made. And it's a quote, and it's, I know that I'm human because I create art. And that's something that has stuck with me ever since that time. And I really do believe that, like what you're saying, we're all creative. If we're not creating art in terms of fine art, like we're creating art in some way, and we're definitely creating. We are creative beings. Our world exists the way it does because of how creative we are. So it is a matter of helping people find, like, what is your creative outlet? What is fulfilling for you? And how do we help you connect in that way and make sure that you're engaging in that, to bring it back to what you were saying about the self-care, how that becomes such an important part of taking care of ourselves and really being able to realize some of those nuggets within that want to be birthed.
Yeah.
Right.
In many ways, I see creativity kind of as the doorway to the answers that you are in search of. It kind of opens up the opportunity for self-exploration and discovery. And oftentimes the things that you're looking for therapy to help you work through, creativity and the art making really helps pull it out of you. And you begin to understand that it was within you all along. You just had to find a different way to access that. And that's where creativity is so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The answers are within all of us. It's just a matter of figuring out how to get there.
Definitely.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. And so in thinking about that question, obviously you help people using the creative process, but how have you used that aspect of being creative in order to design your practice?
That's a great question. In the beginning, I think I was just purely trying to expose as many people to art therapy and welcome as many people into my practice that I could. Mm-hmm. So I think I started with a very big vision and had to find ways to narrow that down into a niche. Mm-hmm. I think that process for me was really in many ways mirrored a creative process, right? You have this idea, you have this vision, you begin to try to go to the drawing table and figure out how it's going to look. You do some sketches, you do some planning, you try it out. Oh, maybe it doesn't work. Okay, let me redo this, retry that. I'll keep this because it looks nice and it worked well. So it's a lot of that same type of approach, right? When you're creating a painting or creating a piece of art, I really had to be okay with letting certain things go that either weren't working or were working but need to be, kind of altered a little bit. Also, just like with the creative process, you have to be willing to fail, make mistakes. Like there was a lot of that. So just being gentle with myself and accepting like it just didn't work, like, and that's okay. And then also just really setting the space became kind of, I think, where my creativity really began to show through, providing, the table, the way I arrange the materials, the types of materials that are being offered. Also knowing that I'm working with adults so that crayons might not always be necessary. Maybe have them available, but also give them things that are a bit more mature, things that maybe allow for more tactile type of experiences, fabric, things that they're already kind of familiar with. I think also is where I allowed my creativity to come through. I also think I got very creative with directives and different experientials that I would utilize with my clients and kind of moved away from the things we learn in grad school is kind of like the go-tos for like, okay, you can do this activity and the inside-outside box, for example. I've used it a lot, right? Yeah. But eventually get to a point where you're like, okay, I think I could definitely get more creative with helping them explore this same concept, but through different materials or media. Right. So really taking the time to sit, hold the space, listen to what's being said, and then utilizing what's being said to spark the creativity, helping them kind of hone in and say, okay, we could definitely explore this little area, this theme, this topic deeper. And now we can bring the materials in to support that process of exploration. So I think that's really where the creativity has shown through as far as my business is concerned, being very almost customizing activities for each individual client, as well as providing them with opportunity to take something home to work on has also been a new thing that I didn't really do with children or in the school setting. Sure. But with my adults, they want to take something home. They want to continue the healing. So helping them integrate that into their day-to-day life has also been a really interesting component of what's been happening.
Oh, for sure. It is such a different process when you're working with adults and when you're working with children, for sure. I've noticed that too, that there are some adults that are definitely more receptive to the homework piece and bringing in artwork that they've made in their own time for additional processing in the experience. Like, I did this. Can we talk about it? Which is definitely doesn't happen with the kids. Yeah. So that's cool. So I know at one point in time, you had been offering art kits on your website, and I was fascinated by it, and I was really curious about it, and I thought it was a great idea. Can you talk about kind of the process? Because I know you said you're not doing them now, but kind of what initiated that idea, and then kind of the process of offering them to not offering them.
Yeah, so in the beginning, I thought it was a brilliant idea. You could not have told me it wasn't. And I quickly saw that it was a lot more work than I anticipated. It actually started because I had an adult client. I guess this was like 2016 or maybe early 2017, who wanted to do homework, but they didn't have art materials to take with them. And at the time, I had like just started in a little office. I had minimal supplies of my own, so I wasn't able to offer my own for him to take, but I was able to create, I ended up creating a very small kit that he could purchase with just very basic materials that I think I probably bought from like Michael's or piecemealed with some of my, things from home. He purchased it for a very low fee and then was able to create the art at home. So I was like, this is interesting. I wonder if other people would also be interested in purchasing a kit that they can utilize at home. So that's where I kind of jumped off with the idea. And then it evolved into a combination of the art materials and then a small kind of pamphlet or handbook that kind of gave, it utilized the elements of art as a starting point for creating art. So helping them understand line, shape, color, form, texture, value, all of those things as a source for, you can communicate through your art through the elements. Lines, cool. Things, different colors can communicate things, all based on your own personal opinions, but giving them kind of the building blocks, I thought was very important if they're working alone at home and don't really have experience with art.
I love that.
Yeah, and so it took off for a little bit, but what I ended up encountering was the price point of my kit was pretty high. It was a $50 kit. So people would be really interested in it. They'd pick it up if I was at like little festivals, and they'd look in it and ask questions about it, but people weren't purchasing it in the way that I expected them to. And I had my price at 50 because I wasn't buying things in bulk. So if I had, if I was able to produce 500 kits, I could have gotten materials extremely cheap. But because I was only making maybe 15 to 20 kits at a time at that moment, I wasn't able to buy as many materials. So again, it knocked the cost of the kit itself up. So it just became really a business decision from a financial standpoint, that it was costing me more money and labor to create and to market them. And I wasn't selling enough, and I wasn't able to lower the price to sell more for those that might have been apt to make the purchase if it was, let's say, closer to the $20 range.
Right.
So I just decided to kind of phase it out and then try to go back to the drawing board and figure out what types of so-called kits or resources could I provide at a lower cost that could still have the same benefit, but could eliminate the need for the materials in the kits, because that's really what caused the price to go up. So currently I'm looking at developing another kind of expanded version of that elements of art as the building blocks for art making, that then will allow them to purchase their own materials or use whatever they already have at home to create, as well as kind of picking up on this trending thing right now with daily planners, and creating a daily planner-ish sketchbook that encourages art making instead of just your typical writing down goals or scheduling your day. So that's kind of where I'm thinking.
Yeah. I love that too. That's super creative.
Yeah.
Very cool. And so have you started doing the research on building the planner, and what you think a good price point for something like that would be, and how many days would be included in the planner? Because I know I've seen some like really developed business planners that they're like super intricate and stuff, and they're only like per quarter, or they're only for a month, and they're not necessarily for a full year, because what you're asking somebody to do, it would just be like a monstrous like size encyclopedia,
Yeah.
a
Yeah,
barrier to bringing it with them.
for sure. Yeah, so right now I'm kind of in the process of deciding if I want to go with a digital version or a printed version. One of my favorite planners that I personally use is called the Best Self Journal. And one thing that I really love about it is it doesn't schedule out like the days, the weeks, and the month. Every page is blank. So let's say you do it on a Monday and then you forget to do it for a week. You can just pick up where you left off and put that date on the next page. So it's not like you've wasted pages if you skip the days or just don't do it. So I definitely would create something kind of similar to that that would last or have enough pages for at least a quarter. So you would, every 4 months or 3 months, you would end up buying another one. So it's, again, not too large, but it gives you the space to, schedule your days as you go, but organically without every day having a specific page already pre-printed. And then also with the digital, I personally have been moving way away from paper and, doing a lot more online or on my computer because, who wants to carry things around all the time? So a digital version could also be interesting, but then I'm kind of conflicted with how do they get the artwork there? Would it be something they have to print out themselves to do, or is it something where it allows them to create little doodles on the screen? I'm not sure. So I'm still kind of trying to figure that one out.
That sounds like that could be a really cool app.
Yeah. I could totally see an app for that.
Yeah. Where then you don't even have to worry about rebuying every 3 months. It would be like a monthly subscription.
Right.
And then all of your artwork for however long is contained in there. And you could use like whatever, drawing features or painting features, digital tools to create your artwork there.
Yeah. Or even having where if you create it by hand, you can take a picture of it and it integrates that into that day's planning.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
And so when do you expect to release that?
I would love it to be available around the holidays and the beginning of the year. That's my goal. So end of December, early January is kind of the time frame I'm looking at.
Okay. Wow. So soon. You've been
Super
working
soon.
on it.
Definitely have been working on it. It's just a matter of digital or print. And now that you've mentioned app, I mean, that's a whole nother avenue that I might begin exploring because it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Very cool. I love that idea. And I know we've kind of moved past from the art kit, but I really think that it's valuable that you engaged in the process of evaluating your financial return on the investment of that project and decided that, okay, it wasn't bringing enough money in, so I'm going to cut it out. How do you go about tracking that type of data and then making sense of it? I know that the finance piece is often something that is difficult for a lot of therapists going into practice, or even therapists that have been in practice. It's not always easy for me either. So how do you go about figuring out, like, okay, is this really worth my money and time that I'm investing in this aspect?
Yeah, so I'm really fortunate to have a couple of members in my family who work in finance and are really great with numbers. Because I'm not. That's not my strong suit at all. So in the beginning, I was really kind of nervous about presenting the data to them and saying, okay, this is how much I'm spending on this stuff. What do you think? But I quickly had to get over that because I recognize, just looking at my bank account, like this isn't going to sustain my my practice. I've got to figure out what to do better and how to be smarter with how I spend money and what I'm investing time and energy in.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to kind of go to them and say, hey, I could really use your help in evaluating, forecasting, is this going to be great? And how much do I need to be able to make this work? So just sitting down with those individuals in my family and having them literally comb through spreadsheets and bank account statements and just asking me questions about like, well, what is your plan? How do you, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? How much money do you think you need for this? And just literally crunching numbers and having someone there to kind of walk me through it.
I love that you reached out for support from people that you trust and know what they're doing with the numbers.
Yeah.
Because it is a big piece.
For sure. And there was those times where I really had to let some things go, even though I was passionate about those projects or really excited about them. It just didn't financially make sense. And it wouldn't put me in the place that I'm trying to get. So, you have to be a little humble and accepting that, yeah, maybe that can come later. Maybe the kids can come later, materials, all of that. So
right.
Setting it aside for now.
Yeah, that's an important part of the process of evaluating constantly. Like the practice is changing in as much as we are constantly changing. And I think that's a necessary part of all the creative process. Like even in writing, people talk about having to do that, and the editing process is so difficult. Yeah.
Definitely.
Very cool. If you had any advice to provide to therapists looking to go out into private practice and build a creative-based practice, what would you say? What would you say to them?
First of all, do it. Follow your dream for sure, right? I think there's a lot of times we get a lot of discouragement from the outside world, kind of pushing us into more traditional career path because they're so-called stable and secure. But if you're driven and you have that motivation, run with it. I think the best advice is to be willing to take risks, but also ask for help when you need it, because it's really challenging to do it all alone. Yeah. I think that's one thing that I've learned, and I'm still learning because I'm super independent and I like to be in control of all the decisions, but it comes to a point where like you can only go through your brain so many times before it's like, I need another person's input. I need to share this with someone. I need help with this. So being able to ask for help, finding a mentor is also really beneficial. Somebody who's maybe walked the path already and can kind of guide you along or give you some, things to think about or things to try. I also think in this day and age, it's really important to find your niche, because there are a lot of people who are pursuing counseling or therapy or, these creative types of professions. So you want to be able to set yourself apart from the competition, but that also means you have to know what it is you're really trying to do. Yeah. Narrow it down. Don't be afraid to niche it up. Like, it's important. You can do a lot once you figure out exactly your population and exactly what you can provide for those individuals.
Yeah, it's a clarity. You get a lot of clarity, and then I think that helps with the marketing piece too. If you're really clear about who the people you're serving are, then you can better identify where they're at and put your information out where they're at so they see you.
For sure. And I also think it helps with balancing the workload as well, because in the beginning when I was working with children on the spectrum. I was working with women and men and women dealing with mental illness. I was doing home visits. I was also still doing my full-time job. It was like way too much.
Wow.
So, within the practice, even when I eventually went into it full-time, I was still trying to work with a variety of populations because I had experience with a lot of populations, but the workload became too much because I would have to, your brain's divided into, okay, well, at the community center, I have to work with the families and create this curriculum, but then in my office, I'm doing something completely different. So it's just like you're wearing so many hats.
Mm-hmm.
By niching it down, it all becomes kind of integrated into one stream of thought. And it might shift a little bit depending on location, but in essence, it's all geared toward one common goal, which for me alleviated a lot of stress and trying to juggle a little less with, creating the activities and setting up the space and building curriculum. I could really hone in on, on my population. So that was helpful.
No, I think that is so true. And it certainly helps with time too. If you're not shuffling from one place to another and you're stationary, that helps too. And then you have more time for your other creative endeavors, like creating your best self art journal.
Yeah,
right?
For sure. Yeah, it gives you a little bit more freedom and time to explore the other aspects of creativity and bringing that into the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Is there anything else that you think would benefit the listeners to hear from you today about practicing and going into the work? I think you have a little doggy in the background.
Yeah, he's let's keep it, not anymore. I think the one thing that I would want to leave the listeners with is the importance of transparency. I think as therapists, that's something that we're confronted with. It's kind of a fine line, between how much do you share about you or your story or, and all of that. But what I have found is that clients want someone they can relate to, right? Not just not as a friend, but somebody that they can see themselves through. So telling your story in the way that makes sense, I think, can be very helpful in kind of breaking down the barriers that we kind of talked about in the beginning. Therapy often has this kind of sterile facade that doesn't always make it approachable for people. But if you can take that down and allow them to see you as a human being, just like they are, it just creates such a beautiful energy in a space, right? Even if you're talking virtually online with someone, they can sense that. So relatability, transparency, just being real, I think is super important. This day and age where people are yearning for connections with other individuals, whether it's friendship or a therapeutic relationship. So really being present in that way, I think, is important. And sometimes that does require us to be a bit vulnerable and to share our story so that they can see, yeah, this is a human being too. And if she can do it, I can do it. Kind of that, that can also be very helpful. So don't be afraid to share a story and let yourself be known, because you never know who's listening and who might just need to hear that story to encourage them to either continue healing or to jump on board with a healing journey.
I completely agree. It's an important part of our growth in professional development, and it's not something that is encouraged or emphasized when we're in grad school, I think, because they're really trying to lay the foundations of strong ethics. And then and so it's not a black and white, a clear, like all or nothing. It's the gray. And how do we find the gray area of like, I'm giving part of myself for that benefit of the client, but I'm not over stepping that line. And so I can understand why we're taught in the way that we're taught. But then we have to do some unlearning in order to learn as we're actually practicing. And I certainly see that with grad students too.
For sure. Yeah, it's a lot of unlearning and relearning.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me and share with listeners. And I hope that they find the topic and the conversation valuable and helpful, inspiring them to go off and follow their path and being a creative therapist and starting their own practice. And if they were to want to reach out to you and connect with you or find more information about you, where should they go?
So they can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is GetArtspired. I'll spell that. So GETART, the word art, spired, as in Sam, PIRED.
Okay. At GetArtspired on Instagram.
My website is getartspired.com.
Oh, cool.
And if you are interested in emailing me, it's my first name, Deanna, DEANNA, at getartspired.com.
Nice. I love the name of your business.
Thank you.
Artspiration.
Yes, I hope to continue to inspire through the arts.
I think that you will.
Oh, thanks.
And when you finish your journal and you know where you're going to be selling it or where it's going to be available, let me know.
Okay.
So you can add that to the show notes as well.
Perfect. That'd be great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Creative Psychotherapist. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For show notes, downloads, and additional resources, head over to the website at www.creativeclinicianscorner.com.